Welcome to Skill Set Counseling. My name is Dr. Felucia. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I focus on the treatment of OCD, spiritual abuse, and cultural abuse. Today's video is going to be within the domain of spiritual abuse. And today I'm going to be talking about enablers of spiritual abuse and how they affect the spiritually abusive system. So one question you might ask is, what is an enabler and how is this important in spiritual abuse? As I've said before in my videos, spiritual abuse does not occur in isolation or in a vacuum. Spiritual abuse is maintained and perpetuated by the spiritually abusive system. And enablers are part of that spiritually abusive system. So another question you might ask is, well, how do enablers perpetuate this spiritual abuse? What do they do? So let's look at the word enablers. Enablers do exactly what the name suggests. They enable spiritual abuse. And they do that in several ways, but in this video, I'm going to cover 3 of them, and I'm going to cover them pretty briefly, okay? One way that they enable spiritual abuse is that they make excuses for the spiritually abusive leader or the spiritually abusive system. The second way in which they enable spiritual abuse is that they target whoever is bringing up the spiritual abuse and blame them instead of addressing the problems with the system and with the leader. And the third way that they do this is that they act as an extension of the spiritual abusive leader or the spiritually abusive system. And they might do this by mimicking their talking points or just repeating their actions. So I'm going to go into depth about each one of these in more detail. So the first one that I talked about is enablers of spiritual abuse make excuses for the spiritually abusive leader or the spiritually abusive system. And they do this by making statements such as, hurt people, or no church is perfect, or no leader is perfect. And while these statements may have a grain of truth in them, the reason why this enables spiritual abuse is because it avoids accountability and avoids addressing the root of the issue. And so in my work with individuals who have experienced spiritual abuse, they'll often say that they hear these things all the time in the spiritually abusive system, and it doesn't address the root of the problem. Okay, so they do this by, when they enable spiritual abuse, they basically make excuses for what is going on instead of addressing the root of the problem and acknowledging what the person is bringing up. Okay, and so also, if you are finding this content helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button, share, and subscribe. What this does is it helps get the information out to other individuals who could benefit from the video just as you are. So let's go on to number 2. They turn blame toward those who are seeking help, okay? And so when someone is coming to the spiritually abusive system, seeking refuge and seeking help, enablers will accuse the hurting person of character issues, or they'll basically blame them for being in the situation that they're in. They might say things like, oh, you didn't try hard enough, especially if somebody is experiencing spiritual abuse or any kind of abuse in their marriage. They might be told, well, you're just not trying hard enough to be a good person, or just point to different character or moral issues with the person. They might say things like, you're very prideful for not putting up with this abusive treatment, right? Or they may tell you things that you have to suffer to gain strength and things like that. They're also told things like they are judgmental, that they are coming in with the motive to divide people. They may say, well, you have a real critical spirit, or you're just a divisive person. Or they might try to frighten them and say, you know what, whatever. This actually happens when the person who's enduring spiritual abuse wants justice. And so they might be asking, what is going to be done about this? And they may be told things like, well, whatever you want to happen is going to happen to you, right? You are bringing judgment on yourself. you're a judgmental person. So they try to scare the person by saying that, whatever you want to happen, what kind of justice that you want to happen, that is going to fall on you because you're a judgmental person. And so what this does in essence is that it tries to mute the person who is bringing up the spiritual abuse. Again, enablers don't ever deal with the root of the problem. And by blaming the person who is coming to get help, they are doing just that. They are removing accountability from the spiritually abusive leader and the spiritually abusive system. The third way in which enablers perpetuate spiritual abuse is that they act as an extension of the spiritually abusive leader and the spiritually abusive system by mimicking talking points and mimicking actions. This is often why people who are in spiritually abusive environments talk about hitting a wall of silence. They say that, look, I went to this leader, I went to this person, they all said the same thing and they all treated me the same way. Okay. And so think about enablers as they are the ones putting the mortar in the bricks that is building up this wall of silence in the spiritually abusive environment. And so people feel weary, they feel exhausted, they feel helpless because every person they turn to is basically saying the same thing. Enablers in the spiritually abusive system act in a way that maintains that spiritual abuse and avoids accountability for whatever is happening. Okay, so I'm going to go over those three again. The first one is the first way, rather, that enablers maintain and perpetuate spiritual abuse is by making excuses for the spiritually abusive system and the spiritually abusive leader. Okay. The second one is turning the blame toward the individual seeking help. So they make them seem like they're the problem, they're at fault, they have a moral or character issue. And then the third way is by mimicking the talking points and actions of the spiritually abusive leader. And this creates a wall of silence, and the person cannot really get any type of help or move forward. And all these things do is they avoid accountability, they avoid addressing the root of the problem. And so this is enabling spiritual abuse. It's allowing it to continue to happen. So if you found this information helpful and you would like tools in your recovery from spiritual abuse, go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com, and you can book a free consultation with me to discuss this. You can also click on the link in the description box, and that will take you to the website, so you can also book your free consultation. May you have a day filled with peace. Bye-bye.